Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today in this video we will have a React interview question that is simply your form validation, and this type of question you will see in your HackerRank skill certification test that is for your front-end development. So you will see a similar kind of question. So as you can see we have a form simply. So we have two input fields, that is first your username and the second that is password. So initially you can see we have a submit button that is disabled. So if the user fills both the input field, then only your submit button will get enabled. And we also have one more thing, that is if a user enters the input field, any one of them, or makes the input field active, and then if he comes out of the input field without filling the data, so we have shown an error, that is username should not be empty, and the same will apply for this password. If he goes inside the password field and he makes that field active, and then if he comes out without filling the data, then again he will see the error. So as the user fills the data, the error will be removed, and the same for this password. See, and if both the input fields are filled by the user, then only your submit button will get enabled. And again, after the submission of this form, see, again the submit button will get disabled. So how to have this? Let's simply start the video. So first, let me quickly have my component and the CSS as well. So first, we need to have the user input. So to have the user input, we need to have input field. That is simply your name field. That is type text, and simply for your password, that will be of type password simply. So input type text simply with placeholder as enter username. Then again input simply as type password, and here simply enter password. And to capture whatever the user will write, simply we need to have an on change event handler. So this would be simply, it will handle your name change, let's say, and the same for this. So this will handle your password change. You can have other names. I'm giving just for your understanding. So simply handle password change. And now to have whatever the user will write, simply we need to have a state variable, right? So simply a state variable. So it will be use state, and then simply let's have the name as simply your username with set username. So initially it would be empty, and the same for your password, simply password and set password. This would be again empty. So simply here you need to have value attribute. Here would be your username, and for your password, your value attribute would be simply your password. And we need to define these functions, right? The on change event handler. So simply your handle name change, and how to have whatever the user will write, simply with the help of event object. So simply let's have here a variable name as value. To have this value, that is event dot target dot your value. Then simply pick this set username. With the help of this function, update the value of your username, that is simply val, and do the same for your password. Simply handle password change, And this time again, do the same thing. Then again, target dot value and user function that is set password, simply val. So we have our input field, simply username and password, and this will be at the top right. So we need to have again a form, as we want to submit the form, right? So simply here we will have event handler as on submit, which will handle submit, and let us have this function as well. So simply your handle submit. So let's say now, we need to have a button as well. So simply before having this form handle submit, let's have one button. So simply a button that will be your submit button. What do we want? On clicking of this button, we want the form to get submitted, right? So form is your handle submit, this function. Let's define this also. Inside this function, what you will do, you need to submit. So let's say we will just console log that our form is being submitted. The form, or simply form submitted. So let's have the console log, and now you can see the default behavior of the browser. That is, the page is automatically getting reloaded. To avoid this, we need to have e.prevent default to prevent the default behavior of your browser, right? So this time, see, our form is submitted. And what we want? Whenever the form is submitted, we want these two fields to be empty again. So simply use these two, set username, set password. So simply you set username again empty, and you set password to again empty. So now let's check. See, the form is getting submitted and the fields are getting empty again. But what do we want? Simply, we want the submit button to be disabled at the starting. When we don't have any data, we don't want to be active, right? So simply we need to have a state variable, that is, let's say your disabled button, and the function simply set disabled button. So initially this would be true, as initially we want it to be disabled, right? Then again, here we need to use attribute that is disabled, which will be our state variable, that is disabled button, that is true initially. So see, initially our button is disabled. Let's have line breaks in between, it will look clean. And here also, and what we want, this button to get enabled as soon as the user fills the data, right? So simply your set disabled, here we will have simply if not value, or if not your password. So what do you mean by this? So this condition will only be true if the not value, it means this value is empty and not password. That is, here we have the truthy and falsy values concept. So not means simply empty. So empty username, empty password. So if either your username or password is empty, this condition will be true. And if this is true, your button will be disabled. But if both of them, the username and the password, will contain data, so if both of the fields are having data, then these two will return false. And then according to this, your disable button will become false that time. So the same thing we need to have here also for your password change. But here this time, as here your val is simply representing your password, and here your value is simply representing your name, that is username. So here value stands for your password and simply username. Now let's check. Initially your submit button is disabled. So as soon as the user types something, let's say anything in password C. As soon as he starts typing, both the field contains data, then this submit button gets enabled, right? So now what do we want? We want to have this message. That is this part. We need to show the error messages if the input field gets active by the user. So simply, again we need to have state variables. That is for your first, let's say name error. It would be simply set name error. Initially it would be false. Then again the same thing for your password error. So let's say your password error. So let's say your set password error. And again, this would be false as well. And now we need to use simply event handler, that is your onBlur. So what do you mean by that? So as you have the onBlur event handler, so as you can see, we have onBlur, which is a React event handler that will trigger when an input field will lose focus. It means if a user clicks inside the input and then clicks outside, so that time this will get triggered your onBlur event handler. And as you can see, it's commonly used for validations to check if the user left a field empty after interacting with it, right? So this thing will be achieved with the help of your onBlur event handler. So simply here you will have onBlur, and then simply let's give the name of function as handle blur. And here what you will do, simply as we have your input field for your username, so here we will pass simply your username, and here again your onBlur, simply your handle blur, and here we will pass simply password, as this is a password field, right? And now we need to define simply handle blur, and here let's say we have field, so whatever we will write here, we will grab whatever we passed here, that is for your password field we will grab this password, for your username field we will grab this username. So simply now we will check if your field is simply, let's say username, so it means if a user click this field, your username, you will get this username. So if the user is inside this input field, so if field is equal to your username, and if not your username, dot trim to delete the leading and trailing spaces. And here also we can have that thing simply. So if not your username, so it means again if the user is inside your username input field, and if he left it blank, if username again empty, then we need to set the name error to true. Then again the same thing, if your field is simply your password, So if the user will click inside your input field, that is password, here we will grab that password and check if field is your password, if the user is inside the password input field, and if he left that blank, then simply set your password error to true. And we need to show the error as well in the UI. So let's say simply your name error. So if your name error state variable is true, then simply show the error. That is your name error. And here we will have curly brace. And I already have the styling. So simply class name would be error for this name error. And the same thing for your password input field. But this time, instead of name error, simply your password error. And here again, your password error. So now let's say, so initially your submit button is disabled. Let's say if a user goes inside this input field, that is your username. And if he comes out, leaving that field to blank. And I forgot to write the error message. So simply, instead of this, we will have your error message, right? That is username should not be empty. And then password should not be empty, right? So instead of that, I pass the state variable. And here also, instead of your set password, simply you will have this function set password error, right? So now let's check. So initially, let's say if a user clicks this input field, that is your username. And if he comes out without having any data, to see, we got the error message as simply username should not be empty. And let's check the same for your password. He clicks the password field and comes out without filling the data, right? So both of the fields gave error. But now, if the user is typing, this error is not removing. So to remove that, simply in your on change, set your name error to false. And here also, this time, set password error to false. So now, if the user writes, see, simply password error, not simply your password. Let's check again. See, now let's try to submit the form. But after the submission of the form, the button is enabled again. So we want to disable that again. So here in our handle submit, simply set disabled button to true again. So now after your submission of the form, see, your submit button got disabled again and our form submitted as well. So yes, that's it for this video. Hope you understood this form validation in a much better way. So see you all in the next one. Till then, take care.